I'm just going to run through what the process for today is going to be. I'm going to start with a bit of an introduction, and then we've got Rachael from South Cumbria Rivers Trust, who's going to talk about rivers and the nutrients. We've got Paul Usher from Hutchinson's, who's going to talk about septic tanks. Andrew Smith from the Lake District National Park, who'll be talking a bit more about the nutrient neutrality side of things. I'm going to do a little summary on caring for your system, and then we've got a question and answer session at the end of the presentations. So if you have any questions as we're going along that you'd like to ask, at the bottom of your screen, there should be a little Q&A button, and then you can type them into that box. We're also joined today by Peter George from Westmoreland and Furness Council, who'll be available to answer questions at the end as well. If I pass over to Rachael, who is going to talk about rivers and the nutrients.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm Rachael from South Cumbria Rivers Trust. I'm here to talk about nutrients and our rivers or freshwater environments. So first and foremost, what is a nutrient? So a nutrient refers to any substance that plants, animals, and/or humans need to live, grow, and reproduce. They're chemical compounds such as proteins, fats, carbohydrates, vitamins, minerals. They're essential for plant growth, especially in the freshwater environment, just like they are in your garden, where you might apply them as part of an NPK fertilizer. Nutrients like phosphates, nitrates, ammonia, they come from the food and drink that we consume, as well as other sources, for example, like cleaning products. So when do nutrients become an issue? So for plants to grow, there is a specific ratio required, especially for phosphorus and for nitrogen. Phosphorus is actually classed as a limiting nutrient in aquatic systems. That is because if phosphorus is not met, or the requirement for plants, it doesn't actually matter how much nitrogen is in the environment, growth will be limited. So if the limiting nutrient is an excess, it will result in excessive growth. So changes in the balance of specific plants in specific ecosystems can affect an ecosystem structure. So this is when we'll find algal blooms in lakes. So pollution in the environment. So as I've said, nutrients come from various sources. It comes from us, from our wastewater. So it comes from wastewater treatment works. It comes from agricultural runoff. It comes from private sewage systems. And it's a particular concern, nutrient pollution, and it can have a long-lasting negative effect on our rivers and our lakes. So when organic matter enters rivers or streams or lakes, it's quickly broken down by microorganisms in the same way a compost heap will decompose. So it uses up oxygen from the water through respiration. So just here in terms of lake versus rivers, nutrients do get flushed through rivers because of the fresh water that comes through. It gets, a dilution effect. However, it can still have an impact on the ecosystem. In terms of lakes, the impacts of nutrients can last for a long period of time. So what we call nutrient enrichment refers to the increase in the level of nutrients in an ecosystem. So like I said, back to where nutrients come from. And then that can lead to eutrophication. So eutrophication is a process of pollution caused from the excessive growth of algae and aquatic plants. Plants die off, they decompose, and then through this decomposition process, the microbes that break down the dead plants or algae, they need lots of oxygen for this process. So effectively, they rob the water of oxygen, which then ultimately can lead to anoxic or anaerobic conditions. So that's defined as the absence of dissolved oxygen in water or the free oxygen in a water body. So ultimately, this is going to have an impact on our freshwater species and the ecosystem. It can lead to biodiversity loss, it can lead to habitat loss, and ultimately species loss, like our freshwater invertebrates, salmon, trout, and also in rivers in terms of critically endangered species such as freshwater pearl mussels and white-clawed crayfish. Yeah, so ultimately nutrients do have can have a major impact on a whole ecosystem. So key points just to take away from that then. So nutrients can be key pollutants to our freshwater environments. I've done a very whistle-stop tour there of nutrients, but it is a highly complex process, and there are daily changes in terms of oxygen and carbon dioxide. And basically, it can cause eutrophication or anoxic conditions where you will have algal blooms and oxygen depletion. And this can have a lasting effect on the environment and on the amenity, water quality decline, and species loss. So ultimately, we need to find solutions to try and stop this nutrient enrichment in our rivers and lakes. And why we're here today, we're here to talk about nutrient neutrality. This is just one way to prevent nutrient enrichment or nutrient pollution in protected areas.
Thanks, Rachel. So I'm going to pass over to Paul Usher now from Hutchinson's Environmental Solutions.
So, off-main sewage treatment, is it a black art? No, I wouldn't say so, but it is certainly a dark and murky corner of the construction industry, as somebody once said to me. Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Usher. I'm the technical manager at Hutchinson's. We're a northeast-based firm of sewage treatment plant pump station installers working across the whole of the UK. So next 20 minutes, I'm going to cover those subject areas. It's going to be a whistle-stop tour, but hopefully you'll be somewhat wiser when we've finished this. If you've got any questions, as Hilary said, just wait until the end and we'll try and sort them out for you. So, the three main sources of sewage: trade, which is sort of like industrial processes, factory processes; agriculture, so runoff from land and animal waste; and then the sewage that we ourselves produce, which we really term as domestic sewage, even though it might be on a commercial basis from properties like hotels or caravan parks and campsites. We're only dealing with domestic sewage in this case. So what is it in domestic sewage that causes problems and pollutes? So we've got pathogens, so viruses, parasites, bacteria, which can cause infectious diseases, some of which can be very serious. So that's one issue. There's organic matter. So that's really our waste. We're sort of like at the top of the food chain. So everything that we excrete becomes food for other animals and microorganisms further down the food chain. And as Rachel's already said, there are nutrients in there, which are basically fertilizers, nitrate and phosphate. So we need to protect the environment for public health and also for our own amenity value. Sorry, I've gone too far there. What happened? Sorry about that. Too keen to move on there. So in terms of off-mains treatment options, really the first one, the most popular one, and the one that's at the sort of like the top of the hierarchy in terms of the Environment Agency and regulatory bodies, is that they really would like everybody to join the main sewer. You can do that by gravity if you're uphill from the main sewer, but if you're not uphill from the main sewer, then you'll need a pump station to pump the sewage uphill to the main sewer. Another non-treatment option, and this is the least favoured of all of them by the regulatory authorities, is a cesspool or a cesspit. As you can see there, there is just a hole in the top of that tank, which is for putting in a vacuum hose to empty it. Ignore the gaping hole in the side. That's basically so you can see inside and see that there's nothing in there. They tend to be very large. So for a 3-bedroom house, you're looking at about a 38.4 cubic meter tank, which would be about 9 meters long and 3 meters in diameter. So that's a huge hole that you have to dig. And for 4 people in a 3-bedroom house, it costs about £600 a month to empty it. So it's an expensive solution. So they're not favoured. One of the most popular choices these days is the packaged sewage treatment plant, which you can see there, and that can discharge to a drainage field, which then goes into groundwater, or it can go into flowing surface water, such as a stream or a pond or a lake. And we'll come back to those shortly. But the most common currently installed off-mains treatment system is a septic tank, as you can see there, and a drainage field, and that discharges to groundwater. I've put drainage field in bold letters there because mostly what gets talked about is the septic tank and very little about the drainage field. So 20 to 40% of the organic pollutants in domestic wastewater are taken out of the wastewater in a septic tank, which leaves the remaining 60 to 80% to be treated by the drainage field. So what happens in a septic tank? So you can see there that that's it in elevation or cutaway view. It might be a little bit sort of confusing to start with, but it comes in from the left-hand side and flows through the system to the right-hand side where it goes out to the drainage field. And just to show you, that's what it looks like in practice. So we've got the inlet manhole closest to us, followed by the primary chamber, followed by the secondary chamber, followed by the outlet to the environment at the end. So going back to that picture there, we have an inlet and a T-piece. That T-piece is to direct the incoming sewage down into the bottom of the tank. It also provides what we call quiescent or very calm or still conditions to facilitate the separation of solids. Heavier solids sink to the bottom, lighter solids such as fats, oils, grease, soap will float to the surface and form a scum layer. And that T-piece, as I say, directs that flow down and prevents turbulence. So those solids settle, and then we flow through the hole in the middle there into the second chamber. Technically, that's actually called a transfer port because we can invoice more money for a transfer port than we can for a hole. And it goes into that second chamber, where that settlement and separation process continues. And then we have a protected outlet with another T-piece, which prevents the floating scum on the surface going out into the drainage field. And the dip pipe doesn't go all the way to the bottom of the tank, as you'll see, which prevents the sludge at the bottom of the tank from becoming resuspended and going out into the drainage field. So the sizing of that is important because it needs to be big enough to facilitate that separation process and also to store the sludge and the scum that becomes separated. And the sizing of that is covered in the building regulations. Just to show you it there again, you can see on that first section, there's very definitely a scum layer sitting on the surface there, and very definitely no scum layer sitting on the second chamber there as well. The observant among you will note that there is a problem with that tank, which we'll come on to later on. These are just images of what are more modern tanks. You'll find that older tanks are generally built out of concrete blocks, which are rendered, a mortar render on the inside to make them watertight, or engineering bricks or concrete cast in situ. More modern tanks are made of high-density polyethylene, as the one on the left-hand side is, or from pressed glass fibre, as the ones on the right are. The one on the left is a straightforward horizontal process with a baffle, 2 chambers. The one in the middle is a vertical separation process with the baffle halfway up the tank. And on the right-hand side, you can see a tank that doesn't have any baffle in it at all. So there are different designs to these septic tanks. What you see from the surface, though, is just that. That is a typical Clarke diamond-shaped lid, and then you see a neck, and then you see liquid in there. You can't see what the volume of the tank is, you can't see what the condition is internally, you can't see how deep the sludge is. And in fact, there's a mechanism inside those tanks which actually prevents you from testing the depth of the sludge. So they're quite difficult to deal with. The older style horizontal twin tank systems are much easier to deal with. So that's the septic tank. The second part of the system is the drainage field. And I would say that's every bit as important, if not more important, because of those ratios that I said about before, of the drainage field actually doing more of the work and more of the purification of the liquid. They come in different forms. So that is what we would call a herringbone system, less used now. Certainly tend to see more rectangular systems like this, and that comes from the building regulations there. You can see on the right-hand side of that, there's that's the structure of the trenches in which the drainage pipes are laid. So you have a slotted pipe which allows the water to go out into the drainage field. Underneath the slotted pipe and around it, you generally have 40mm clean stone, which allows the development of a bacterial colony within the drainage field. You have a geotextile membrane above the pipe, and then you put soil back on the top. Minimum dimensions there are about 200mm of soil over the crown of the pipe. You have 110mm of pipe, and then you have a minimum of 200mm of stone underneath the pipe. And that gives you a total trench depth of about 500, well, exactly 510mm. But what is the key thing about the drainage field? And you'll have noticed I've not called it a soakaway, because soakaway is a real misnomer, because you're not just trying to get liquid from the septic tank to disappear into the ground. You're actually relying on the drainage field to, as I say there, remove, convert, or degrade that organic matter that the septic tank hasn't removed through settlement. And ideally, you're looking for the drainage field to remove nutrients, phosphates and nitrates, especially if it's discharging to a sensitive receptor. How does it do that? Well, you've got to distribute the septic tank effluent over a large enough area to percolate through aerobic soil at a rate slow enough for chemical, biological, and physical filtration processes to complete that process. I've written that down and read that out because that's really very important. If the drainage field doesn't achieve that purpose, then it's not fulfilling its function, and you are bound to pollute the environment, whether you can see it or not. You don't necessarily have to have pools of stinking water coming up through your garden to be polluting the environment, because you cannot see phosphates and nitrates as they move through an aquatic receptor. Ideally, that's what you'd have within the drainage field trench. So you'd have a slotted pipe through which the effluent gets distributed. They form what's called a biomat, which can be anything from about a centimetre through to about 5 centimetres thick. That actually slows the process of the flow of the effluent vertically downwards, and does help to maintain an unsaturated soil beneath the drainage field. And it's very important that it is unsaturated, because unsaturated soil is generally aerobic, and aerobic decomposition is probably about 10 times quicker than anaerobic, i.e. without oxygen decomposition. But you can see on that right-hand side, that's what happens to a drainage field over a period of years. So when it's new, it's clean stone, the liquid gets distributed. When it's 10, 15, 20, 30 years old, it's starting to bind up all those cracks, pores, capillaries between that 40 mil clean stone is becoming bound up with bacteria and particles from the septic tank that carry through. Some figures there, which I won't go into great detail over, but it tells you roughly what the cleaning performance is, or the transformation performance of complex chemical compounds in sewage into much simpler chemical compounds, and even sometimes straight elements. And you can see there that with the nitrogen about halfway down, you get background levels of nitrogen, background levels of, well, NH4 is ammoniacal nitrogen, NO3 is nitrate, background levels in that. And with total phosphorus, you get background levels and on towards 10 milligrams per litre in a good drainage field, and even better when you're looking at 3 feet below the trench bottom. How do you ensure that your drainage field is properly designed and built? Well, first thing is you do percolation tests to assess the porosity of the soil, because the drainage field, as we've said, needs to be large enough to spread that septic tank effluent over a large enough area for it to go through the soil at a rate that the bacteria can act on it. So you do percolation tests. And that's basically a trench, and you dig a hole and then you pour water into it, and you time how long it takes for it to drain away. You average all those out, and that will give you a velocity of percolation over your proposed drainage field area. Then you dig a trial hole. The orange bit there is the pipe, the grey stripes are the stone. And you're always looking for where limiting factors are. And if there are limiting factors, and they are usually groundwater, as in this case, or rock, they have got to be at least 1.2 meters below the bottom of the trench. So we've said before that the minimum trench depth is 510 mil. So to get 1.2 meters below that, you need to be digging to 1.71 meters. And that's with a pipe that sits, its invert, or the bottom of the pipe, sits 310 mil below the surface of the ground, which is very rare, usually deeper than that. So often you're digging to 2 meters, 2.2 meters down into the ground, and you're hoping not to hit any limiting factor, groundwater, rock, clay, because clay doesn't drain, obviously, terminal moraine up in the Lake District, hard pack blue terminal moraine doesn't drain either. So you're looking to avoid those limiting factors. Poor construction of a drainage field is one of the problems that we come across. So that there is what you call a rubble-filled pit soakaway, often used to be put on the end of a septic tank. They don't work because they don't spread the effluent over a wide enough area, and basically you just get saturated soil underneath, and therefore no aerobic processes, just anaerobic processes, which are very slow, and that leads to pollution of the groundwater. That's a crate system. It does exactly the same thing as the rubble in the previous one. It provides void to be filled up with liquid. Perfectly acceptable for rainwater, which is clean because that's just an attenuation device. You're waiting for the rainfall to stop and the the excess rainfall coming from your roof to sit in that pit until it can soak away slowly, but you're not polluting anything with rainwater. So they are not suitable for wastewater treatment. And that's just a demonstration of what happens when you have that type of thing. The rainwater, the septic tank effluent just goes directly downwards. And then when you get saturated conditions, you can see on the top right there, that's what happens when everything is full. So it might rain a lot, and then you get that surfacing of septic tank effluent there on the ground surface. And so you're achieving neither your aim of public health protection or of environmental protection. There is a picture of a septic tank which is just backed up and is what we call boiling over because the downstream drainage field is badly designed or blocked because of solids transfer from the septic system. You get solids transfer from the septic system when you have rainwater getting into your drainage system. So that flushes the septic tank out. If you remember, we talked about those quiescent conditions, those calm conditions, the avoidance of turbulence in the septic tank. So when those solids get flushed through the septic tank into the drainage field, it blocks up, those particles block up the pores, capillaries, cracks in that drainage field and just prevent the water draining away and also prevent any form of treatment. Lack of maintenance of the septic tank, so lack of periodic desludging is another cause of things backing up, as is dip pipes falling off or being knocked off, so that the inlet and the outlet in particular aren't protected. So that's another issue there. So it's important to maintain those systems as well, because in terms of expense, the septic tank is by far the cheapest part of any system. Septic tank you can buy for about £1,000, £1,200, put it in the ground. If you know what you're doing, it won't take longer than a day, day and a half. A drainage field, depending on the porosity of the ground, is going to set you back probably at least £4,000 for the smallest one, including setup time on site, and can easily run into £25,000-30,000 for a site where the drainage is not so good. So protecting your drainage field is very, very important. That's what happens when you have to dig everything out because it's backed up. That's the unfortunate man who had to dig it out. And then sometimes there isn't a drainage field at all. That was at a youth camp in South Cumbria. Basically, you see a pipe coming in from the top left-hand side there. That just took raw sewage into that pile of stones. And it was expected to somehow treat the sewage because it was a built structure that people thought oxygen was going to get into. And of course it didn't. And yeah, so just a plume of sewage underneath that. And sometimes again you see no drainage field. That is just above Elterwater Tarn, I think it is, up in Langdale. We saw that septic tank on the right-hand side earlier. So you've got the outlet manhole there, and that is discharging into that field. You'd think that there would be potentially some sort of drainage field there, but when you take a closer look, you see that the outlet pipe is actually broken, and everything that comes out of that final chamber of the septic tank goes down that crack that you can see in the middle of that shot and simply goes into the ground in another plume and eventually works its way down into Elterwater Tarn. It doesn't do that, is effectively what we're saying there. Because what we're looking for is that drain field to allow the liquid to percolate through, and as it percolates through, it takes those complex chemical compounds out, or holds them in the soil in some way, particularly phosphates. And then you get cleaner water returning to groundwater and back into the water cycle. You can see there that's we mentioned this tank earlier on, and I said I didn't know if people would notice what was wrong with it. At the far end on the right-hand side, you'll see there's no dip pipe, and at the inlet end, there's no dip pipe either. So 2 failures on that particular tank there. This is another small septic tank. It's two chamber system built of brick, as you can see. But as you can tell by the depth of those pipes on the left-hand side, it's leaking. So nothing is going forward into that second chamber. It's not surprising, really. It wouldn't do much when it got there because it had never been emptied. It had turned completely into its own solid soil ecosystem, and you could stand on top of that and jump up and down in it. It would be perfect for growing potatoes, I think. Coming back to one that we saw earlier with the Clargester diamond-shaped lid, looking into that tank there, that shows you that there is no scum layer on top, which is another problem, or indicative of another problem, which is letting rainwater in to the system. And you can see there that the scum layer doesn't exist because it's been flushed through into the drainage field. So moving on very, very briefly to packaged sewage treatment plants. These are a sort of like a more modern invention. I suppose they started appearing around the late 1970s, early 1980s in one form or another. And really what a packaged sewage treatment plant does is it combines the function of the septic tank and the drainage field in a prefabricated factory-made unit, which is a process which is then repeatable at scale. So it takes away the necessity to build a drainage field on site, which means that these are allowed to discharge to watercourses under the general binding rules, and also with a permit if necessary from the Environment Agency. But really it's combining that function. So in that particular unit, what you'll see on the left-hand side is primary settlement, and on the right-hand side is aeration, so creating an aerobic environment by pumping air into there. And the same bacteria that exist in a drainage field exist in a sewage treatment plant. All you're doing is providing a sealed unit to amplify a process that occurs naturally in nature within a sealed tank. But that said, the pictures that you see in brochures and online always look great, but it isn't a black box, as it says there, to turn wastewater into Evian. And I think that potentially is more the picture that we see generally than not. So packaged sewage treatment plants are good. They have their place, but they do need maintenance as much as a septic tank does, if not more. That brings me to the end of that whistle-stop tour. We try to do our best, but we can't always convince everybody to do that. Thanks very much indeed. Look forward to questions at the end.
Thank you, Paul. Lots of things to think about there. I think the out of sight, out of mind often springs to mind when we talk about septic tanks and things like that. Nobody really wants to go and investigate what's in theirs underground. So yeah, useful to see all those examples. Yeah, if people have got questions, do drop them into the Q&A and we'll get to them at the end. Andrew Smith from the Lake District National Park is now going to talk a bit more about the nutrient neutrality and enhance your tank scheme that they're running. So I'll hand over to Andrew.
Brill. Thanks, Hilary. you see my screen sharing? Excellent. Good. Yeah, so I'm Andrew Smith. So I'm Head of Development Management at the Lake District National Park Authority. So I am a town planner. I am not a scientist. I am not a drainage expert or anything like that. I am just a planner. And I'm going to talk a little bit about nutrient neutrality, which is something that's going on in the planning system at the minute, which is very much, again, to do with drainage. This is concerned with one of the pollutants that Rachael and Paul mentioned, which is phosphates. And so conceptually, it's pretty easy. We've got watercourses in Cumbria that are in bad condition because sewage, even treated, pollutes. And very simply, if you want to build a new house in some of these affected areas, then you need to take out at least as much phosphate as your new house will put in. Otherwise, you can't have a planning permission. And this stalls development and impacts on growth and jobs and the housing that we need as a country. Why is this a thing? It's all to do with legals. It's all to do with the law. It's not new law. It's long established law. It's just that as we've come to understand more about the condition of our watercourses and realize that our lakes and rivers are not in the condition that we need to be, the way that the law operates is it kicks in through the planning system and prevents you getting planning permissions because a competent authority in the national park, that's us. But if you're in Cumberland, it's Cumberland, and if you're in Westmoreland, it's Westmoreland and Furness. We all have to work within the same legal framework and make an assessment, what's called a habitats regulations assessment of the potential impacts of development. So I'm not just wearing my national park hat, I'm wearing a sort of Cumbria-wide hat today. So there are 4 Cumbrian catchments affected. We've got the River Eden SAC, so Penrith, Kirkby Stephen, Appleby, Carlisle, Brampton, all of those areas are affected. We've got parts of the River Derwent and Bassenthwaite Lake SAC, so that's Borrowdale, Keswick, some bits of the River Marron as well. Esthwaite Water Ramsar, that's down in the south, sort of south central lakes around Hawkshead, and we've got some bits of the River Kent as well, some within the national park around Staveley, and some outside the national park, sort of the Greer Rig area. And each of those have basically too much phosphate in, and as we've heard, that's coming from mains drainage, non-mains drainage, and farming as well. Okay, so the way that this works through the planning system is that any application that proposes new overnight development is affected. So if you want new overnight accommodation, a new house, new camping, new glamping, new tourism development, you're going to be affected by it in those catchments, national park or outside. Or if you're wanting to do an agricultural development that demonstrably is going to increase stock numbers, you're likely to be affected as well. And so applicants, house builders, whoever it might be, in these areas, they need to do a Natural England a budget calculator. That's where they work out how much additional phosphate their proposed development is going to add into the catchment. They've got to come up with a mitigation strategy, so some way of taking out at least as much phosphate from the catchment as they're going to put in, and we make them do a habitats regulations assessment as well. And then we secure all of that through either a planning condition, a legal agreement called a Section 106, or a conservation covenant. All of that, if you're a house builder or a would-be developer, is quite burdensome, to be honest. And if you look, I mean, this isn't just a Cumbrian problem. You know, there are 27 catchments across the country that are affected by this, 70 odd local planning authorities. If we look at Cumbria alone, we reckon we've probably got about 3,000 houses stalled now, stuck in the planning system, mostly in the River Eden catchment. Because of this, for Cumbria in the longer term, we reckon probably about 13,000 houses stalled and held up because of this. So it's having a big effect, and it's something that concerns successive governments, because housing is, well, it's homes, it's jobs, it's growth. And as a country, the current government has set the ambition of delivering 1.5 million new homes by the end of the Parliament. And this is a barrier to this, not just in Cumbria, but across the country. So government is putting its money where its mouth is. In Cumbria, we've been awarded 15.28 million of capital money plus about £930,000 of revenue money to facilitate interventions, mitigation in the catchments to unlock houses. And we're looking to deliver, and government would like us to deliver within 24 months enough mitigation to unlock 4,935 homes. And the way that we would do that is by facilitating those things to happen on the ground. I'll tell you what they are in a sec. And then you provide that you sell essentially the mitigation benefits, the phosphate benefits of those to developers, because house builders want to build houses. They are not really well equipped to be land managers, for example. So sort of solutions, ways you can remove phosphate from the catchment, comes back to thinking about, well, how does it go in? Agriculture, non-mains drainage, mains drainage. You can take land out of agricultural production. That delivers phosphate benefit. You can improve and upgrade non-mains drainage. So replacing inefficient septic tanks or package treatment plants with newer systems that are cleaner, more efficient, and if operated correctly, will reduce the overall phosphate loads going into the catchment. You can do other nature-based solutions, riparian buffers. It's basically trees, planting trees and strips of woodland along watercourses. That removes phosphate from the catchment. Woodland removes phosphate from catchment. Wetlands, constructed wetlands are effective as well. And then there are sort of what we call grey solutions. So they might be things like water efficiency measures. They might be sort of plug-in systems that you connect to an outfall and then that provide a further treatment to water. But we're here to talk about the non-mains drainage bit. So part of this is something that we're calling Enhance Your Tank. So that's an opportunity for landowners who've got, existing lawful but underperforming non-mains drainage systems to potentially have their systems upgraded at no or low cost to them. This is something that we're going to be running in partnership with a contractor who will facilitate this for us. If that sounds of interest to you, there are some expectations. So not everything will be suitable. We can only upgrade systems that are serving overnight accommodation. They're the Natural England rules in respect of nutrient neutrality. So it's got to be to a house or a hotel or whatever it might be in order to be bankable. It's got to be on something that connects into the habitat sites and has that hydrological link. Otherwise, you're not getting the betterments that are required for the protected sites. It can't be done through chemical dosing. So chemical dosing is, as it sounds really, you dose the effluent to reduce the amount of phosphate in it. It involves the use of chemicals. It involves quite a lot of management. It is not something that we will be supporting as a methodology. Septic tanks that drain to a watercourse are illegal. So if you've got something that is illegal, we are not able to count as mitigation works that will get you up to a legal standard. The scheme can only capture the benefit of phosphate savings between the lawful level and any improvement on top of that. If you're upgrading a package treatment plant or a plant that discharges to ground at the moment, the expectation will be that you will continue to discharge to ground. You can't take a package treatment plant that currently discharges to a drainage field or a septic tank that discharges to a drainage field and then put a package treatment plant in that connects directly into a watercourse, because those changes in pathways mean that we might not see the phosphate reductions that we need, and you will be expected to meet general binding rules or permit requirements as well. The process that we'll be going through, there's an expression of interest form that people can complete now. If this sounds of interest, we would then pass those details on to a contractor. The contractors or ourselves would assess systems, see whether they're going to generate suitable phosphate yields, essentially whether it's good value for public money. We're looking to be taking this live from later this spring. If you were to enter in, there's going to be an expectation that you meet the minimum effluent quality standards for at least 80 years. That's a requirement of the scheme. That's a requirement of the habitats regulations. That's all secured through legal agreements. They run with the land, so they bind the current landowner, but also if the property's sold, they would bind successive landowners as well. And any phosphate credits that are generated from those improvements would go into the Enhance Your Tank program. If any of that sounds of interest, get in touch with us. So just do a search, Google search, or whatever search engine is you like, to Lake District National Park, Enhance Your Tank, and that'll take you to our website, and you can see the details on there, or you can contact us. There's an email address there, nutrients@lakedistrict.gov.uk. Use that email address whether you are inside the national park or outside the national park in Cumbria. It's a partnership programme of us and the other Cumbrian councils. So if you contact us through that, then we will either point you in the right direction or assist you. And I'm sure if there are any questions, we can answer those. Thanks, Hilary.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andrew. That was a really good summary of the quite complex process that's going on with the current nutrient neutrality work. So I am now going to just do a little summary on what the next steps are for people, and then also things to think about as well. So think about caring for your system. These apply whether you're using a septic tank or another non-mains drainage system, or whether you're on mains drainage as well. So the key thing here is about the 3 Ps that we talk about. So only flushing pee, poo and paper down your loo. So not flushing anything else, not other tissues, wet wipes, cleaning wipes, kitchen roll, cotton buds, hair, sanitary products, dental floss. All of these things can clog the pipes and cause blockages either within your home, which I'm sure you can all agree would be awful, or within your own treatment system, or in the main sewers, out in your street, or actually at the wastewater treatment works themselves. So it's just a really key thing to remember, whether you're on non-mains drainage or mains drainage. Those are some really key things to think about. So remember the 3 Ps. The next thing is just about thinking about what you put down the drain. Using conventional bleach, if you are on a non-mains drainage system, is it will kill off the good bacteria that you need, which are essential for the decomposition in your tank. So eco bleach alternatives are available and are effective for non-main systems. Things like laundry soap, dishwasher detergent, and washing up liquid. Try switching to the eco-friendly cleaning brands, because these will contain less phosphates. And as we've heard earlier, phosphates in the watercourses is what causes the algal blooms and the plant growth that can stifle aquatic life. And then also try to avoid washing oils, fats, paint, that sort of thing down the drains, as well, as they can cause these fatbergs, which I'm sure people have heard about on the news. And that can be either in mains drainage or in septic systems. These are best disposed of by pouring into a container and then placing in the bin, or fats and oils can be put in compost bins in small quantities. The next thing to just think about is if you're running a business like a holiday accommodation or hotel business, which is on a non-mains system, about trying to make sure that the information is there for your guests about, what sort of system they're on. For lots of visitors who come to Cumbria and the Lake District and these areas, even outside of the Lake District, they may be unfamiliar with the fact that it's not just a mains drainage network. The Call of Nature website, which is callofnature.info, has got a lot of information and resources there with advice and guidance on types of tank systems, maintenance advice, how to know if it's failing, as well as information packs for accommodation providers on non-mains drainage. So if you're interested in any information there, do check out that website and you can get in touch with them and they can send you some property packs. They've also got information there about neighborhood emptying schemes, which is a way of you may actually save money doing it this way, that if you get in touch with your neighbors and you're all on a non-mains drainage systems, if you can sort of team up and get the company to come out and empty them at once, it could make it all a bit cheaper for you. But there's lots of information on that website. So it's Call of Nature is what it's referred to as. That's the end of the sort of formal presentations. We've now got an opportunity for some question and answers. So if anybody's got any questions, do please put them in the Q&A box at the bottom, and then we can try and get them answered. I'm going to stop sharing and ask the other panelists to come back on so we can answer these questions together. So if we just have a look, there's no questions being asked yet. I don't know whether any of the panelists have got other things that they just want to raise awareness of or direct people towards other resources while people are just thinking about questions. I'm sure there will be some questions to come for people with specific sites where they want to know about whether their tank will be eligible, what the sort of options are there. I don't know whether Andrew or Peter, if you want to just talk briefly about the process now in terms of the kind of moving forward with the submission of these forms, what the process there is.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about that. So yes, if somebody's got a septic tank or a package treatment plant that they think might be suitable or they're interested, so it's got to be within one of those affected habitats catchments. Yeah, if they contact us on that email address, so nutrients@lakedistrict.gov.uk, what we will do is we will then pass their details on to the contractor that we appoint to run that scheme for us. That contractor or ourselves will do an appraisal of that system, see whether it will provide the yield, provide enough phosphate mitigation essentially to unlock housing elsewhere in the county. So it's got to be enough phosphate, it's got to be in the right place. So there are some requirements around that. It's got to be upstream of the impacts of the housing development that it's going to facilitate, for example. So yeah, either us or our contractor will appraise that, and then if it's suitable, it can go forward.
Great, thank you. We've had a question put in asking, can you sell your credits directly if a builder wanted to fund it?
Probably one for me as well. So yes, we have seen this in the national park. I think Pete will have seen this outside the national park as well. Is that builders and landowners essentially just pair up, and we've seen that for non-mains drainage upgrades. So builder wants to build some houses over there. Nearby landowner has an existing system that they are happy to have upgraded and which will meet all the suitable requirements, and they just do a deal between them. That's absolutely fine. It needs to be locked down legally. So through the planning system, we do that through what's called a Section 106 agreement, so a legal agreement that's enforceable by injunction, to make sure that everybody meets their requirements. But yeah, there's nothing to stop a landowner and a developer just coming to that bilateral agreement separate of the planning system. That's absolutely fine.
Great, thank you.
So yeah, we've got another question here. Our septic tank is located in the field next to our property. Would this qualify, assuming I obtained agreement from the landowner?
Sounds like me again,
Andrew?
doesn't it? Yeah. So there are I mean, it's pretty common for a septic tank to be within the field, if I'm honest. So yes, that might be something that's eligible for the scheme and suitable. You obviously would need the landowner's permission. Um, if you are in a field as opposed to being in the garden, there's probably going to be a requirement to obtain planning permission as well. That would be wrapped up as part of the process through the contractors that we're looking to appoint.
Great, thank you. So we've had a question here, which I'll read the whole thing out. It says, in Ireland, septic tank owners must register their systems with their local authority, ensure proper maintenance and periodic emptying, and prevent pollution of water resources. Is there a similar system in the UK? I think this is a really good question about what's the ongoing requirements for the maintenance and kind of how does the new owner of the new tank then record that and report on that to show that they have kind of fulfilled the requirements for that. It might be Andrew again, or it might be Peter. I'm not sure.
Shall I? I'll go a little bit, and then I wonder if maybe some of the things about maintenance might be good for Paul. In terms of if we're in the enhanced the tank and stuff under the nutrient neutrality scheme, legal agreements, section 106. That's the mechanism for securing that. But Paul, I don't know if you want to say a bit about general binding rules and permits and
Yeah,
whatnot.
of course, yeah. The Environment Agency introduced the General Binding Rules in 2015 as being a risk-based approach to small sewage discharges. So a small sewage discharge doesn't require a permit from the Environment Agency if you can meet the general binding rules that are applicable to your site. And you can find those on the gov.uk website. I can supply links through to Hilary later on, and she can probably post them somewhere. There is no requirement in England to register your septic tank, packaged sewage treatment plant, up to the sort of like the limits of the general binding rules. So that's 2 cubic meters, 2,000 litres, about 13 people's worth of wastewater to a drainage field. Above that, you do need a permit from the Environment Agency, and 5 cubic meters, 5,000 litres, about 33 people's worth of wastewater daily, if you're discharging to surface water. And above that, you need a permit from the Environment Agency. You also need a permit, as I say, if you can't meet the general binding rules, and that's usually because you're discharging to a sensitive receptor, especially one that's aquatic. So you're discharging to a triple SI, SAC, Ramsar site, something like that. In Wales, you have to register your septic tank or sewage treatment plant, the discharge. Likewise in Scotland, but not in England. So we're governed by the general binding rules, where things are low risk, and where it's a higher risk, the Environment Agency wants to know and requires you to have a permit.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we've got another one here. Is there a simple calculator to work out potential credit?
Oh,
Andrew or Peter?
yeah, that I'll have a go at that, and then Pete can
Thank
correct
you.
me. There's a calculator. Whether it's a simple calculator, I'm not so sure, but there is a calculator. So if you just do a Google of, if you're in the River Eden, for example, River Eden nutrient calculator, then there's a Natural England calculator that you can use there. It makes quite a lot of assumptions, if I'm honest. So, we're assuming about 140 litres per person per day. We're making some assumptions on the number of people who occupy a property. If you're in the River Eden catchment, there's an assumption that it's, the average occupancy is 2.2. And it makes some assumptions about the average phosphate outputs in terms of milligrams per litre. But I mean, just to give an idea, if you're on an average performing package treatment plant, it'll assume about 9 milligrams per litre or thereabouts. If you're on an average septic tank, it'll assume about 11. milligrams per litre on average. Compare that to where non-mains drainage outputs are, currently some areas you're looking at sort of 0.8 milligrams per litre. After 2030 in the bigger places, your Penriths, your Carlisles, your Keswicks, you're going to be looking at 0.25 milligrams per litre. So, there will be some septic tanks out there that are currently putting out maybe 12 times the amount of phosphate per house than something connected to the mains would be. After 2030 on existing systems, you could be seeing an individual property that's on a septic tank that's putting out, by the model, 35, 45 times the phosphate of an individual house in a mains area. So there can be quite a difference using the calculator.
Paul, you've got your hand up. Did you want to come in on that as well?
Yeah, just a quick one on that. The volumes of water used per day and the occupancy rates of properties are different for nutrient neutrality calculations than they are for meeting the general binding rules or the requirements of a permit. So that does need to be taken into account by property owners if they think that they're receiving conflicting advice. So, for example, Andrew said there that I think the daily wastewater production is taken to be 120, 130, 140 litres for nutrient neutrality. The industry, the off-mains industry, always uses 150 litres for the calculation of drainage field sizes, septic tank sizes, and package sewage treatment plant sizes. Occupancy rates of houses are taken to be 2.2 people per house, I believe, or 2.1 is it after review, within the Lake District catchments for nutrient neutrality, whereas for the sizing of a package sewage treatment plant and drainage field, it goes on the number of bedrooms plus 2. So a 3-bed house equals 5 people, a 4-bed house equals 6 people. And they are the numbers that will be used for actually sizing the system. So just for people to be aware that there are two different aims. One is nutrient neutrality and one is compliance with general binding rules or permits, and they use different figures.
Sounds quite complicated. Thanks, Paul. We have another question here saying that our septic tank is on our neighbour's land. Would that qualify? I assume again it's yes, but with the right legal agreements in place, then that would be the same. Yes. And then another one about, Paul, have you got any cheap or cost-effective hints and tips for making sure that your septic tank doesn't get into such a poor condition as the awful ones shown in your photos?
Basically, it's a question of just maintenance, really, and being careful what you put down. As you said, Hilary, be careful about what you put down there. Wet wipes are the work of the devil as far as wastewater treatment is concerned. And it needs to be a septic tank and a packaged sewage treatment plant need to be periodically emptied. And the frequency of emptying is a function of the number of people that actually live in the house and the size, the volume of the septic tank. So that needs to be taken into account. A good emptying company, I'm afraid we don't do emptying because it's like a conflict of interest, but a good emptying company will be able to advise you on that. And it's always good to, even though it sounds unsavory, is to actually watch them empty the sewage treatment plant, watch them empty the septic tank to make sure it's empty. Because it's easy to, when you empty a sewage treatment plant or a septic tank, the vacuum tanker can't choose what it takes. And what you're looking to do is get rid of the sludge and the scum. But that's quite difficult to do because you've got to aim the vacuum pipe at that and suck that in. It's a bit like hoovering the dust. You've got to aim for it. So yeah, make sure the tank is fully empty when it's finished, because what gets left behind is the sludge and the scum, not the liquid. So just make sure that that goes. But yeah, just keep a check on it really, and yeah, occasionally lift the lid, look where the drainage field is. As far as sewage treatment plants go, just make sure it's still making a noise, bubbling away or turning, rotating. And yeah, ideally, you'd have a service contract on anything mechanical. We can help, can I say that? With a septic tank, there's very little in terms of maintenance. As I say, just regular periodic emptying and keep an eye on it. And be careful what you put down the drains.
Lovely,
Great,
thank you,
thanks,
Paul.
Paul.
So we have another one here. We purchased our property in 2016. Is it safe to assume we have a local septic tank set up?
Can I answer
Who would
that
like?
one?
Yes, you can, Paul. Yeah.
The general binding rules were introduced in 2015. So we knew they were coming out, but the Environment Agency did what they call a soft launch, which was basically not telling anybody about them because they had no money to. It's become more prevalent that solicitors are aware of off-mains drainage requirements, particularly in the run-up to 2020, because that was the end of the grace period from 2015. So I'm afraid the answer is no, you can't guarantee that your system is compliant if you're in 16. As you get closer to 2020 and after 2020, those questions should have been asked. But in the forms that your solicitors received, there should be information about the sewage treatment system, how it works, how it's been maintained, etc., etc. If you want an opinion, we do work in Cumbria.
Great, thank you, Paul. Another question here says, as over 4,000 new homes are looking to be built, it is unlikely 4,000 septic tanks will be replaced. Where will phosphate credits be generated elsewhere to meet this figure?
You want me to step in there on that one, Andrew? Give you a break. Yeah, we're not looking to purely provide mitigation through upgrading septic tanks. So there are a range of different forms of mitigation that we can use for nutrients. And one of the other major ones is land use change, which is effectively taking less productive agricultural land out of use, and usually involves the creation of woodlands and shrubland. By taking it out of use, whether that's arable land or dairy sort of grazing lands, then you're removing a source of phosphorus, which comes from either fertilizers or livestock, and you can generate that sort of phosphorus reduction in that way. We are working in partnership with Natural England. We're one of a number of pilot schemes across the country where local authorities are working with Natural England quite closely, and there is a call for sites out at the moment, which I think, Andrew, remind me, I think closes at the end of this month, round about the end of this month, so another couple of weeks yet to go. And there's already been some large areas of land that have been identified, and Natural England will be leading on that in terms of acquiring the land and taking that through a land use change process. That can be quite efficient in generating phosphorus credits. And the view at the moment is that we could probably, as a combination with the septic tank upgrades and with land use change, we should be able to unlock pretty much all of the stalled housing within the affected catchments. I don't know whether you want to add anything to that one, Andrew.
Yeah, I think the other thing I'd just add to that is it doesn't, the methodology doesn't work out as being one septic tank for one new house. Because the majority of new housing will be built in mains areas, and the methodology indicates that mains areas are generally cleaner now, and within the next 3 to 5 years will be substantially cleaner because of the legal requirements that government has placed on United Utilities. After 2030, you could be seeing one house on a septic tank in the country being as polluting as 35, 45 houses in a town's area, if it's not being looked after properly, or just because it's old and less efficient than it could be, and less efficient than the mains treatment that's in place.
Great, thank you both. Another question here. Is there any sort of marketplace for buyers and sellers of credits? Is there any transparency about what credits are worth? I'm not sure who wants to take that one.
I'll have a little punt. No, it's emerging. It's an emerging market. Is there, and what we're seeing at the moment is that credits are transacted typically between, as somebody said before, directly between an applicant, a developer, and a landowner. And so we don't have sight of that. That's just a private arrangement for them to reach. In other parts of the country, we're seeing average credit costs, and they vary. Credit prices vary, and there are a range of factors in that. It is to do with the ease of finding solutions, the package of solutions that different areas have, the nature of schemes. Are they doing package treatment plants and non-mains upgrades? Are they doing land use change? There's a market element as well. So what can the housing market, a developer, stand to pay for a development? What's the supply like? What's the demand like? In Somerset, I think they're seeing around £30,000 a kilo of phosphates. Wiltshire was 38,000. I think that's going to move nearer to about 42.5. There's quite a lot of variation, because there's a range of factors that are going on in those emerging markets.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. So we just have one here. Further to the last discussion, I think, Paul, this is one for you. So Northern Ireland Water offers customers one free septic tank emptying per year. And the advice on their website is that septic tanks and treatment plants will not be fully emptied, as the volume of sludge is required to ensure the continued bacteriological functioning of the tank. Is that correct?
Oh, we're into grey areas now. Yeah, there's always a little bit left in a tank when it's 100 litres or something like that, because it's impossible to vacuum it out completely. And then basically as it fills up, those biological processes start to occur again. It's a naturally occurring process. So you're never going to get a septic tank sort of like squeaky clean. And usually there's bacteria left on the walls, in a little bit of liquid at the bottom, in the drains on the way down. So it's going to start again quickly. So yeah, moot point, I would say, is that one.
Great, thank you, Paul. So that looks like that's all the questions that we've had for now. I'm not sure if anyone is frantically typing in any last ones. I haven't seen any more arrive. So I've just got
jump in, Hilary.
Yeah,
Sorry, yes, there was one that I answered just directly, just to say that for anyone who came in late, that this session is being recorded and it will be available on the Eden Rivers Trust website after the session.
Great, thanks, Rachel. Okay, so I've just got one last slide to go through, which is just really a bit of a summary about what's next kind of thing and what you can do. So I guess the things for this are, yes, if you think you have a tank that could be eligible, there's the expression of interest form on the lakedistrict.gov.uk website. The website address is there, or I think if you just search for nutrient neutrality, and whether you're in the Lake District or, as Andrew said, or outside of that area in the Eden catchment or in the other areas, it all comes under the same form. So you can fill that form in. If you have a tank already, check what state it's in. Does it need emptying? How's its maintenance? And see if you can talk to your neighbours about trying to encourage them to get their tanks emptied at the same time, because as I said before, it may get cheaper and you might save some money that way. Think about your cleaning products, looking for those eco swaps. If you're running a holiday property, making sure that you inform your visitors about the non-mains drainage system that you may be operating, and going to that Call of Nature website that's got some useful, property packs and things there. Remember the 3 Ps, pee, poo and paper only down the loo. And also what goes down your drain, fats and oils and paints dispose of in the bin and not down the drain. Further information is on that email address there. So nutrients@lakedistrict.gov.uk is the place if you've got specific inquiries or you just want a bit of further information. If you get in touch on that email address, and then they'll be able to help you. So that's the end of the session today. Thank you, everybody, for giving up your lunchtime on a Thursday to talk about this. That's been really helpful. Thank you to the other panelists for joining us. That's been really useful. Hopefully that's been valuable for everybody. This will be available on the Eden Rivers Trust website shortly when we've uploaded it. Thanks, everybody. Bye for now.